north of 60. I'm Heidi Schweighofer. Today my guest is Nick Bellis, the code inspector for the city of Hudson. I invited Nick to be here because, to be very honest, I didn't even know we had a code inspector in this city, and I'm very curious about what he does and how he does it. So thank you for being a guest, Nick.
My pleasure, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about how you ended up here.
I'm from Ohio most of my life, and the last couple of years we moved down to Florida. I was working out well, enjoyed the sunshine, and got a call that we were going to be grandparents.
Good reason.
So we started looking up this way, see if there was any way to come back and get a little bit closer to family. And as luck would have it, Hudson was hiring a code inspector, which I had a little bit of background in, so I applied, and
Boom.
boom, it worked out well, so I'm here.
What skills do you have to be a code inspector? What exactly do you do? And you said you did it in the past as well.
I was a zoning inspector in some smaller townships, so to be a code inspector, you really have to have a sense of community. You have to want to be vested in the community, see it thrive, and be able to interact with the citizens.
What a nice viewpoint. That surprises me to hear. Not surprises me that it's necessary, but that's a really nice viewpoint to have.
Yeah, it's a community you either live or work in, and you have to deal with the citizens. So you really have to have a true interest in doing the job appropriately.
Are you like a police officer without a gun or?
There's some similarities. The police and I both enforce and investigate problems with the city ordinances. Mine mostly deal with issues on private property, some public property. The police deal with both public and private property. So they have a lot more responsibility in dealing with a whole range of issues. Mine's a little more directed towards private property issues.
Now, you work with the police and I mean, if they found a situation where the house was in complete disrepair, would they contact you?
Yeah, the police, any agency can make a referral to us, and we'll go out and investigate. I did recently work with them on some parking issues downtown. So
really?
Yeah, we have a private parking deck, and people were just parking there and leaving their trailers there for months at a time.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, which is against the code. So working with the police and the property owner, we were finally able to get the trailers moved out, identify who they were, and try to find new homes for the trailers so they're not just camping out there.
You're not the garage sale sign guy, are you? I remember when I was first moved here, we were told we couldn't have a garage sale sign on a telephone pole, or I don't even remember this. Do you do that?
Well, our department does community development. You have to get a permit for a garage sale.
Yeah, well.
But fortunately, I haven't had many issues with that.
I remember someone referring to the garage sale police and when we first moved here, and I thought, oh my Lord, I'd never heard of that before. So that was you or your predecessors,
yeah,
kind of.
Perhaps.
Nick, tell me, so what exactly, I don't want to sound naive here, but what does a code inspector do? And what is different from doing it in a private residence to a public one? And tell me about the people who tend to refer to you most, I guess. Do you get a call from my next door neighbor telling you that my boat's in the garage? So talk about that.
There's two main objectives. I enforce the Hudson Land Development Code, which has to do with zoning issues, where you can build, what you can build, things like that, what you can do on the property.
So is that new construction?
New construction, and then also the property maintenance code, keeping property up to minimum standards, proper painting, lawn care, piles of debris in your yard, your neighbor's yard, things like that. So those are the two main objectives I deal with.
So how does it work? Let's say I call you, and I can think of someone, and say there are trees down, they are all over the property, they're covering the windows up on top, the grass hasn't been mowed, there's piles of junk all over the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get calls from a number of different people, or I'll see something as I'm out driving around conducting inspections. So it's either complaint driven, people calling in, or proactive, where I go out and look for it, or I see it. Could be any number of things. If there's trees falling down on the property, it depends if they've fallen just on the property itself, or if they're falling onto the right-of-way. Once it hits the right-of-way, then it becomes a code issue. So there's some things I can address with trees and some things I can't.
So if it's on the property, it's okay?
There's limited things I can do if a tree falls on a property.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
What about piles of debris and people keeping God knows what in their piles and I'm not talking just a messy backyard. This is like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we deal with that. I'll go out and inspect it. If there is violations, I'll contact the homeowner. Sometimes it's face-to-face. Other times the first contact is through a we call courtesy letter, explaining what the issue is, how to address it, trying to develop a time frame, how to address it, things like that.
Tell me about the time frames. So let's say somebody's called and my husband happens to keep all this junk in the backyard and our neighbor has called.
Okay.
Then, okay, so you now you send a letter, and then you come to our house.
I'll send a letter out and I'll say, please contact me generally within 2 weeks, and I'll give a date. Most people will call me, hey, this is what's going on. I've been meaning to clean it up. We just had a new baby or lost my job. So there could be extenuating circumstances, a number of reasons somebody got themselves into that situation. So after discussing it with them, we try to develop a time frame. What's reasonable? I'll generally ask them, what's reasonable for you to try to get this up?
Oh, that's a nice
or that
thing
clean.
to do. You don't just say it better be in 2 weeks.
No, that's not usually how it works. We always try to work with the homeowner. If it's a big issue, maybe we'll try to break it down. Let's do this part first. And we get that done, let's work on this part or that part. We don't want to make it overwhelming. We like to see something tangible getting done. It kind of motivates them. Okay, we got this done.
Now we can go on to the next task.
That's in general how it works.
Nick, but what if it's an elderly person living alone and they don't have the physical strength to clean up their backyard and they really don't know what to do with, who do they hire to come in and do you have referral sources or resources?
The city doesn't like to make referrals like one vendor over another.
To a company particularly.
We'll kind of direct them here. Check Craigslist, check our Hudson Hub Times, check the Record Courier.
Oh, okay.
Google. I'll try to, as much as I can, give them some wide range of sources to check.
Good.
Sometimes they stumble on people, or I might stumble on somebody that just fixed that kind of problem, and I'll say, this is a person you may want to contact. And sometimes that works out for them.
Good. And so now you've said, let's say it's the 2 weeks. Okay. And you come back, and I haven't done a darn thing. Now what happens?
I'll try to talk with them and say, what's going on? Is something still the matter that we can't move forward with getting it cleaned or getting this moved off your property? Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. So then we call a notification letter will go out to that person.
And that's an official?
It's just more of a courtesy letter again.
Okay, all right.
And I'll be a little more proactive, and I'll maybe give them a 30-day deadline. I'd like to see this resolved within 30 days. I'll cite the code for them so they understand this is the code.
Okay.
And encourage them, to ask them if they need any help. Do they understand what needs to get done, that type of thing. So hopefully it's done by then. Sometimes it's not. If that's the case, I try to reach out again. What's going on? Sometimes I'll get no reply. So I'll send we call it the violation letter, where we give them another deadline, try to be reasonable, give them another deadline. Perhaps it's not as long as 30 days, maybe 2 weeks now, since they've accumulated a lot of time, generally months,
Right.
months and months by now.
Right.
And if they don't, the letter does state that this could be referred to our city prosecutor for, possible prosecution.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, then your hands are. I mean, if there's no compliance, there's a point where something. Yes, I can see.
At
has to
some
be
point,
done.
something has to get done.
I want to ask you a dumb
Sure.
question that has to do with this. Do you ever watch the show Hoarders?
I do.
I love that show. And there's always a code inspector involved.
Yes.
And he's always the one who sort of prompted the whole clean out. And then he or she goes back and have you encountered situations similar to that where it has been a hoarding situation both inside and outside? How would you know unless the homeowner let you in? And I've always been curious about the code inspection part of that show, to be very honest.
The stuff that you see on TV, those states or those entities, their code inspectors have the ability to inspect on the inside. My particular job, I'm mostly concerned with the exterior.
Oh.
But we do work with Summit County Health Department, and they have some ability to get on the inside of certain properties, depending if they're rental units or if they're very dilapidated, and obviously looking from the outside, that's not a safe structure. So there's different things that come into play of who can go inside and inspect and when.
Oh, so you can't go inside unless I invite you in.
Correct.
I mean, you just are doing it all by. Do you ever look in the windows and?
I can see things. I can tell, yeah, this person might have a hoarding issue, or, this person's organizational abilities are
Lacking.
and but generally my scope is the exterior. And I can refer other agencies to inquire about the inside and maybe the person's social abilities, physical abilities, if
Yeah.
some issues there.
Yeah.
I do have one case I'll be calling another agency to help me with, because I'm concerned about that individual's abilities to try to get things organized.
That really is what I was hoping to hear, that you work with other, not just resources and saying to me, here's a handy guy who can come in and take stuff out of your garage or whatever,
Right.
but what if I'm literally incapacitated, or my home, you can tell, is messy as my outside? Or what about things like animal neglect? Has that ever come into play for you, that you find a lot of feral animals and worry about what's going on with the animal population along with the people living there?
I haven't had that encounter. I've had complaints of kind of livestock or farm animals
In Hudson?
in Hudson.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, so I'm working with a couple of those right now.
We're talking big animals. Oh,
Chickens in a backyard,
I love it.
and some farm animals out in a more rural area.
Everybody wants chickens now.
Yeah.
They make these cute houses, and everybody thinks
yeah.
it looks like fun to have chickens. But
Until they get loose into the
yeah.
neighbor's yard, then it's a little different story.
It's very different. Oh, okay. We're not allowed to have chickens or livestock in our yards here in Hudson, are we?
Right now, if you have an acre or more, you can have chickens.
Oh,
Depending on where you live, you can have livestock. It's kind of all about location and size of your lot. So, yeah.
oh God. Oh, how interesting. All right. What about commercial properties? Or no, let's go to new construction.
Okay.
So what happens, do you just make spontaneous visits of new construction, or are you contacted by like the builder or the contractor, by the people who are building the home, by the developer of the neighborhood? How does that work with new construction?
So there's a whole permit process where they submit pictures, blueprints. Those get reviewed by our city planner, and then once approved, they can start building.
Okay.
Like today, I'm going to go out to one of our developments, and I have 6 inspections of lots that they've already got ready to build on.
Oh,
So I'll go out and make sure the lots are appropriate, and then once I okay those, they could start building the house.
appropriate in terms of size and
Size,
drainage and all of that business?
That they're protected properly from adjoining lots. They meet things like that. And then once they start building, we contract with Summit County Building Department, who will inspect plumbing, electrical, the framing, the HVAC systems, all the working mechanics. And then when the house is all done or the commercial building's all done, I'll go out for a final inspection, and I'm basing it on the final plans that were approved. I'll check the exterior, make sure it's built as it says it was going to be built. I'll check the landscaping, make sure it's properly seeded, it has trees and shrubbery as it should, things like that.
According to the plan.
Correct.
So all of the design, not the design elements, I don't want to call them that, but the restrictions in terms of color of siding or how many trees you have to have or what the garage, and all of that is pre-planned before you actually get there. You just make sure that they are doing it according then to that plan.
Correct. We have a historic district kind of in the center of town that they're a little more particular
I bet
as to how things are to be built. They want to keep them as genuine as possible to the character of the neighborhood, the old building. Newer construction is a little less stringent, but there are still codes that must be followed.
Have you ever had anyone try to bribe you?
No bribery. I've had a couple. I've had a couple business owners offer me free meals or something because I came in to inspect. They're doing an addition or they're putting a shed back there, and it happened to be a restaurant and I just said I appreciate it, but I can't.
Yeah, I was good. Can you accept any gifts from anybody, really, in terms of?
Not really. I mean, it's just a policy that you don't accept anything of gratuity of any kind, just to keep the conflict.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
People were very nice about it. They said, well, come back after you're off work or something. I just said, I'll come back maybe when you're all done with the permit, and we'll see.
All right. Nick, what do you see in Hudson particularly? I go around this town and I think it's such a pretty town.
Yes.
I just love living here. I've lived here a long time. I noticed, now and then you'll find a house on a street or in a neighborhood that looks like it's been neglected or empty. Is that the kind of thing, like empty homes? If they're not with a for sale sign, I know we had some issues here in Hudson of rental properties that were being used for parties or something. Does that involve you in some way?
Yeah, the latter you talked about.
I remember that was in the news.
City Council recently passed a short-term rental process, so
Oh,
Those type of houses now have to be registered with the city. They have to go through a permit process. They get inspected by myself and the fire department to make sure they have smoke alarms, carbon
monoxide,
detector,
yeah.
there's appropriate amount of storage, no electrical issues, fire hazards like that. And then I'll come in and inspect to make sure they have adequate parking. There's no obvious concerns with adjoining neighbors, things like that. And to try to avoid the problems in the past with
The parties.
the parties and things like that.
So do you, I know that there are some, at least I heard this from a city council meeting, listening to it online, but that there were some homes that are now Airbnb or whatever, vacation rental properties in Hudson, not very many. So do you inspect those as well for if you're going to be bringing in people after people after people every week?
Right now, it's an annual inspection. We did about 4 or 5 right now that I'm aware of that have been permitted and ready to go.
Okay.
So we won't go in every time somebody comes and goes. It's kind of an annual inspection.
Okay.
Unless somebody brings something to our attention that there's a possible concern or violation.
Okay. Or the place starts going down the
Correct.
tubes in
You
terms
know,
of...
if we see it or somebody complains about it, then we can go in and look at the situation.
I never thought of Hudson as having any Airbnbs. I don't know why, but I know that's more popular nowadays. Nick, what would you say is the most interesting part of your job? I know this isn't on our list, but I'm really curious.
I like no day is the same. You know, some days I'm out in the field most of the days, other days I may be in the office trying to take care of necessary paperwork. And then every call I get, let's say to go out about look at this or look at that, sometimes it's as it's reported. Sometimes you go out there and it's totally different than what somebody called in and said. So
Making it usually it being worse than they said or being better than was reported?
I've had both. Sometimes
Oh,
I'm
really?
going out there for one issue, I end up finding 4 or 5. So it just depends. It's
Yeah.
really hard to tell till you get there.
I imagine that your job would change every single day. I assume that there are some things that would be scheduled, but then you'd get a call from Jennifer, our community resource
Yes.
coordinator, who might, say, "Hey, you better please go out here and look at this."
Correct, yeah. I could have a scheduled day, but a lot of times people will call, come in and report something. And if it's urgent enough, I'll have to adjust my schedule and tend to that first.
Yeah, and then go. What about, this is dumb, quick question, because believe it or not, we are almost done with the show.
Sure.
This is a dumb question. Okay, RVs, boats, big old somethings
Yeah.
that people have decided to park on the side of their house in their driveway forever and ever and ever. Are those allowed in Hudson? Are we allowed to have those big vehicles sitting in our driveways?
There is the ability to store boats and RVs on your property.
Oh,
It has to be behind the front of the house, either on the side or in the rear. And there has to be sufficient screening, trees, bushes, fencing, to obscure the view from neighbors.
oh man.
So the goal is if you're going to park those on your property, they shouldn't be very, very obvious. You may not be able to screen them out totally, but the goal is not to make it so obvious that it's an eyesore type of thing.
Okay.
We did have a lot of issues this year with RVs coming and
Yeah.
going.
I had heard that.
And I address them the best I can. Some people understand. Some are compliant, some aren't. So I'll deal with those as I have to.
Your letters, visiting,
Visiting, yeah.
letter, visit. You're such a nice person to be doing this. I would expect you to be mean now and then. Maybe you can be
Some
mean.
people think I'm mean.
No. I don't think so, Nick.
No, there are a few, but I don't take it personally. It's just a job.
I hope you stay with your job.
Aye.
It sounds, I really like your point of view. I like how you have approached
No, thank
this
you.
city. I feel like we do have a very small town and a little bit of a bigger town, but I think people try to get along and do what's good for each other and our
Yeah.
neighbors and neighborhoods.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I try to treat everybody fair and equitable. The same tape measure I use for you, I use for the same person, so
No sneaky stuff.
there's no sneaky stuff. And
And I can't offer you a dinner if you look the other way to my RV in the backyard.
I'm not starving, as
No.
you can see, but I can't accept the free dinner.
All right, I'll keep that in mind. Nick, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Thank you for watching North of 60. Nick will leave his contact information, email, and a phone number at the end of our show, and we'll make sure that you can see it so that if you do have a complaint about or a question, you can give him a call. Thank you so much for watching.